Hello, I'm WD and I'm going to be showing you how to make a datapack registry for Minecraft using Neoforge 1.21. Here I already have a project that I was working on previously, and I'm going to use this just as a base to have something to work with so we're not on a new project. So the first thing we're going to do is make a new package for our to contain our classes, basically, which is just going to be one class. In this example. So we're just going to call it a fish because our datapack registry is going to be a fish properties, which is going to contain a bunch of different variables that we use then somewhere else in the code. It doesn't really matter. So after we have a little package, we're going to make a class. This is going to be our fish properties. This is going to be a record, not a class, actually. Because it's a record, we need to do this. There you go. And now inside of the parentheses here, we're going to put all the variables that the fish properties are going to have. So the fish properties, for example, will have obviously which fish it is referring to. It's going to have a chance to get the fish when you're fishing. Maybe it's going to have, I don't know, a bunch of different things it could be, right? So we're going to store all of those into here as a variable inside of these parentheses. So the first thing is going to be, for example, a resource location. Let's call it a fish. Okay, and now let's put an integer, call it a base chance, for example. Let's call it boolean. This is going to be let's just call it boolean because I don't know what to call it. And yeah, so here you put all the variables that you want your data pack to have, and each of these entries is going to link to an entry in your JSON. So to make that link to the JSON, we need to make a codec. Codec is a Mojang serialization little tool, I guess you can call it, to convert, Java classes to JSONs, or the data in a Java class to a JSON. So we're going to make a new public static final. This is going to be a codec. Make sure you select the correct class here to import, or the correct package to import. This is going to be a codec of type fish properties, so just a codec of the type of the record we're making right now. Let's call it a codec. This is going to be equal to a record codec builder dot create record codec builder dot create, and here we're going to let me just get my reference code here on the side. Yeah, here we're going to do, for example, instance, and then with a little arrow. And then, instance dot group. There you go. Now let's move this down a bit. There you go. Let's close this so we have more things to look at. Okay. So you do this, and then inside of this is where we're going to make all the links to the JSON from these variables. So each of these variables needs to link to an entry on the JSON. And to do this, we're going to get the codec of these respective variables. If you're using, base variables, so to say, or Mojang ones, you're gonna already have a codec to use most of the time. Not everything will have a codec, but most of the things will have a codec ready for you, especially if it's basic, like a resource location. It's just a string, really, with some extra stuff. So for example, for the resource location codec, we can just do resource location.codec, and this will work. Depending on what you're using, you might not have a codec available, so try to keep your data simple so it's easier for you, right? And then we can make it complex when you're converting it back into the record. Okay, so you get the codec of the property you're getting, or the variable you're using, and then you do dot field of, and this is going to be the name in the JSON. So for the name on the JSON, we're going to call it a fish, and then you do the dot for getter, and this is the method that gets that basically converts the JSON back to the Java class. So if you're using a record like this, which is the easiest way in my opinion, you just do your codec, or sorry, your record name, and then colon and the variable name. And you're going to do this for each of the entries you have. So I'm just going to copy paste this. Now for an integer, we have a class that has a lot of codecs called just codec. Make sure you once again select the correct package. And then dot, this is going to be dot int, and we're going to call it a base underscore chance, and for getter of the base chance. And then same thing for the boolean. We're just going to do a codec, and this is going to be a bool. And then let's just call it a bool, because I don't have a better idea. And there you go. So once you have this, you have all of them here after the first parenthesis, which closes the instance.group. Here you're going to do .apply, and then you pass in an instance, and you pass in, sorry, you don't pass in the instance, you pass the name of this thing that you named here. So you can name this whatever you want, doesn't matter. And then here you pass a fish properties new, which basically, like when you run the codec, it will make a new instance of fish properties. You don't need to have this variable here. You can put this variable anywhere. It just makes sense to put it inside the fish properties. So you can just do fish properties.codec, and this codec is referring to the fish properties, but obviously you could put this anywhere because it's a public static final. Anyways, so once you have your codec, you can start registering, but we're gonna see a few extra things about the codec and the encoding, which are very useful. So the first thing is that these are mandatory for the JSON. If you don't want them to be mandatory, you can do optional field of, and then here you give it a default. So if we make this have a default of 23, you just do this optional field of, and then the name like before, comma, and then your integer or whatever data the codec is referring to, right? So if you need to, for example, give an optional for the resource location, you do a new resource location, or sorry, resource location dot from namespace and path, and then you would do whatever. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to do a field of for this, and so the integer is an optional. The other two are mandatory. If you don't put them in the JSON, it will crash and give you an exception error and stuff like that. Okay. Another very helpful thing that you can use is a list, and lists are really nice. To use a list, you do codec.list. So let's make a new instance over here. Let's do a list of resource locations. How about that? A list, import that of resource location, and let's call it I don't know, let's call it baits, right? It's a list of possible baits you can use. And it's missing a comma over here. Okay. Now, to do the codec for that, you would do codec.list, and here you pass the codec of the element in this list. So the codec for the resource location is just resource location.codec. So you just pass that in. And then you do the same thing for getter. Oops. Oh, sorry. Right, we need to do field of first. Oops. Field of, and then let's call this baits. And then here you do the for getter, and you do fish properties baits. There you go. And everything is good, and forgot the comma over there. So this is how you do a list of things, and this is going to be like a list in the JSON as well. You do codec list, and you pass inside the codec of the type of the list. Okay. And then you're basically done. Now, it's worth noting that obviously this takes in other codecs. So if you want to have like nested stuff, so to say, for example. So let's imagine you have, I'm just going to copy paste actually, because this will be easier to show. So imagine that we have this other record over here. There you go. So we have this other record, which has its own codec as well. And I want to use this record into my codec, right? So for this, you would just do this, and you would do a new variable type of whatever codec this name is. This one here is called world restrictions. And you can see here, it has a bunch of lists of dimensions and biomes and stuff. So we do this, and we call it world restrictions. And here we need a comma. And that's a typo. There you go. And then we would do the same thing here, where we would reference the codec inside of the world restrictions. So we would do world restrictions.codec, and then dot field of, and we call this world restrictions, and then for getter, and this is fish properties dot, or not dot, but colon world restrictions. So now this is basically a container of this other codec. So you can keep nesting stuff like this if you want, and you're going to make a very big JSON that keeps going and going. But this is just something that you can do if you so wish. Okay, so now that we have the codec and you understand more or less how a codec works, one of the types of codecs anyways, we need to actually register this for the datapack registry. And to do that, we go to an event. So in your main mod, you're probably gonna have an event bus subscriber like this. And if so, you can just do a public static void, let's call it add registries. And this is gonna be a datapack registry event dot new registry. And here we do event, sorry, I forgot to give it a name here. Event.datapack registry. Or add, yeah, datapack registry. Okay, so here we're gonna put some stuff. Let me do the subscribe bus or the subscribe event before I forget to make sure you're using the subscribe event. You know, this would be on the same place as your other stuff you have. So like the client setup and the article registration, stuff like that. Okay, so once you have this, now here you need to give it a resource key of your registry and your codec. So this is going to be the resource key, blah, blah, blah. And this is going to be our codec. So we can already put that in, which is going to be the fish properties.codec. And then there's another thing you can give, which is for networking. So if you want your registry to sync from the server to the client, which there's no reason not to do that, you do this. You give it again, basically. So the first one is for the server. The second one is for the networking, I believe. Okay. And then there's another thing you can give it, which is in the documentations for Neoforge. And I don't know exactly what it does, but we're going to put it in anyways, just for the sake of it, which is a builder, little arrow, builder.maxid 256, whatever that means. So now here we're missing the registry key, as you can see. Now, to make a registry key, this is just the same way you've probably done before for other stuff. So we're just going to do a public static final key. This is going to be a resource key. Make sure you import the right class, because I believe there's some that are slightly different, like the registry. There's some different classes. Yeah, make sure you don't use Java RMI registry. Make sure you use the Net Minecraft core registry. And then this is going to be of type fish properties. So it's just going to be your codec name. And we're going to call this a fish registry. And this is going to be equal to a resource key dot create registry key. And here it's going to be a resource location. So this is going to be a resource location dot from namespace and path. And this is going to be your mod ID. So in my case, it's palegarden.mod ID. This would be whatever mod ID you're using. And then the path, we'll just call it fish. Okay. So now that you have your resource key of registry of fish properties, or of whatever record you have, you can pass this into here. And there you go. It's basically done. Everything is registered. Everything is listening. We just need to actually make the JSONs now. Okay. So to make the JSONs, you go to your resources folder. You go to your data, which I don't have in this project. So we go data, and then here we go the data pack name, which doesn't really matter. But in this example, I'm just going to call it Pale Garden. And then you put your mod ID, which in my case, it's Pale Garden again. So for most of you, it's probably going to be the same name twice. And then here you put the name you just registered over here in the path. So this is going to be fish. And then you can see we have data, Pale Garden, fish. Pale Garden being my mod ID because I was porting Pale Garden to 1.21. So that's why I have this project. Okay, and now here inside of fish, we make a new JSON. Let's call this an example.json. So this is going to be our entry, our first entry. So we're going to do curly brackets, open them up. And here we're going to put all the properties that we have from our fish properties, which is going to be a resource location, an integer, a boolean, a list, and then another custom data type, which is just more lists of more things. Okay. In fact, let me just do this become a field of an optional field of just so I don't need to type that off and it crashes. There you go. So we're just gonna do this. This default, as you can see, it just links to basically an empty list. So it just makes a new world restrictions with an empty list to match all of these variables. So you don't need to worry about this if you're not using a custom thing. It's just so I don't need to write it on the JSON. But on the JSON, we first have a resource location. So we're gonna do just fish, which is the name of the property over here. You see, so this fish is what links to this value here on the JSON, and this is gonna be the resource location that the codec is going to translate back into the variable. Okay, so the codec is gonna get the value inside of these, inside of here, and it's going to translate that into a resource location data, or a resource location variable to then put into the fish variable over here in the record. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So here we're just going to call it a Minecraft diamond. Oops. And then we can do the next one, which would be an integer called base chances. So we just do this, and this is going to be like 2, for example. It's going to be an integer. Then we have a boolean called bool. So we do bool. This is going to be true, for example. Doesn't really matter because it doesn't do anything. And then we have a list of resource locations, which is a bait. So for this, you get the name, and you do like so. And here you do like this. You do the square brackets, and this is how you do a list in a JSON. And here you put the resource locations, which would be like this, right? So we just do this, and then you put a comma, and you put however many entries you want into this list. So let's have a diamond. Let's have a gold ingot, and let's have rotten flesh, and let's have a string, and let's have stick, whatever. So as you can see here, this baits is a list of resource locations, which links back to this list of resource locations called baits. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And this is how you would do a list. So same thing for a custom type. If you're doing nesting things, you would do a world restriction, and then you would open it up. And here, if it keeps nesting, you keep opening up square brackets, and you keep going like that. Okay, now that we have our example done, I'm just going to copy it across to make a second example. Call it a cod. This is a cod. Amazing. Base chance is gonna be 6, and then the baits is just gonna be what do you use to fish a cod? I think you use a stone fish a cod. Beautiful. So now we have these two JSONs that are different and have different things. And this is basically done. When you open the game, they will be in the registries, but how do we read those registries in other parts of the code? You just need access to the registry access. So the easiest way to get access to that is through the level. So a lot of things will have the level, right? So if you have access to the level, you're good to go. You just do level.registry access, and then here you do get registry or throw, and this is the key. Inside of here, you need to put the key that you use to register, which in my case is this key over here. Usually you want to put this in a better place. So for me, that would just be the pale garden class dot client mod events class dot fish registry. There you go. And here you can see it. Now, if we start the game, let's just put, let me start this in debug actually, so we can put a breakpoint and we can look inside of the level so you can see the data. And yeah, that's basically it. If you don't see the data, it's most likely you got these two wrong, or you forgot to subscribe to the class. You forgot the subscribe event, or you don't have the event with subscriber on your class. So double check those if you don't see it in game. And to see it in game, I'm just gonna go into the world. And here we're just gonna trigger this breakpoint, and you can see here we have level, and this is on the client level render thread, and then we have a lot of things in the level. We can go to registries, registry access, and here we can go to registries, and here you have all the vanilla Minecraft registries, and we can look for ours called pale garden, for my case, colon fish, and you can see over here. And here we go to values, and you can see size 2, which are the two JSON entries converted into a fish properties record. So those two JSONs are now converted into a fish properties record and are stored inside of the registries of the game. Okay. And that is mostly it. Now, if you want to cycle through all the registries to get some data or whatever it may be, right? For that, you would do a for loop. So you would do for whatever name you called your record, and then just a variable name. And this would be this thing over here, which this is a registry of fish properties, by the way. So we can do this, for example. As you can see, this thing over here is just a registry of fish properties. So you can just cycle through it like so. And here you can do inside whatever you want. So you can do fp dot fish base chance world restriction. So you can get all the variables. These variables are the ones that are in the record stored. So you can just get these variables for whatever JSON it's looping through, and then do whatever you want with it. Okay, I think this is mostly it. Hopefully this helped you, and good luck on your modding journey. Let me know if there's anything else I can try to explain in the comments and stuff like that.